Good evening, everyone. Thanks to everyone for joining today's virtual public meeting on Forging Ahead. First, the MBTA team has a presentation, and we ask that you please hold all comments until the end of the presentation. Second, we'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being audio and visually recorded and will be made publicly available. Third, we have planned the meeting to go into 8 p.m. today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few meeting controls for folks who are not familiar with Zoom. Next slide, please. Here are a few tips for folks who would like to view the ASL Interpreter at all times. First, keep your viewing settings in gallery mode. It should be the default setting. You can change this by clicking the bottom that says gallery mode in the top right of your screen. Gallery mode shows all presenters on the screen together. This ensures you can see the interpreter as well as the speaker. If a presenter is sharing slides, the view will change. Your screen will primarily display the slides with presenters and interpreters video moving to be on the small in the top right corner. Often the default setting will show only the speaker, not the ASL interpreter. To change this, you can pin the interpreter video. To do this, click the ellipses on the top right corner of the interpreter's video and select Pin Video. You will need to repeat this process each time we switch interpreters. The ASL interpreters expect to switch approximately every 20 minutes. Next slide, please. We also have closed captions for this meeting. By default, subtitles should be appearing on the bottom of your screen. If you do not see the captions, please press the closed captions button to get them started. Slide 4. Next slide, please. Following the presentation, we will first answer clarifying questions and then open the floor for comments and testimonials. If you have any clarifying questions, please type it into the chat pod during or following the presentation. If you have any questions on using Zoom platform, you may use the chat on the MBTA tech support to resolve any issues you may have. Next slide, please. On today's call, we're joined by FMCB Chair, Mr. Joe Aiello, as well as FMCB Chair, Vice Chair, Ms. Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, and Director, Mr. Brian Lang. We would like to acknowledge those elected officials who are here today in their offices. Now we'll turn things over to Vice Chair Monica Tibbetts-Nutt for a few welcoming remarks.
Thank you. Good evening, and I thank you all so much for attending tonight's Forging Ahead public meeting. I know that it is not easy to attend these meetings, but it is incredibly important for us to hear your thoughts directly from you. I'm joined this evening by my fellow board members, Chairman Joe Aiello and Director Brian Lang. We are here tonight to listen. We are here to better understand what the proposals are and to better understand what your responses to those proposals are. This is personal. We are invested in the health of our communities because we live in those communities. Furthermore, this is personal because we are in the midst of a public health crisis, and this crisis has shed even more light on long-standing social inequities that many of us, myself included, have devoted our careers to ameliorating. The MBT seeks to alleviate these inequities, not increase them. The service options presented tonight are the culmination of months of work, but they are also a starting point. We don't know if we've gotten it right. That's why we are here, to present to you, our customers, what the team has analyzed and what they propose. While we are not raising fares, I recognize the financial burden these changes would create for families, and I do not take that lightly. This is the beginning of a discussion meant to preserve essential services for the riders who need them most. We are attempting to undertake a reevaluation of the investments necessary to preserve and improve the agency's services. We are not faceless bureaucrats. We are your neighbors, your fellow riders. Your concerns are important to us. We are here tonight for you. Whether you are an elected official, an advocate, an essential worker, or someone looking for better employment or educational opportunities, this is your system. And we are here to ensure that you're heard. And now I would like to welcome Laurel Paget-Seekins to walk us through the proposed service packages. Laurel?
Thank you, Director. My name is Laurel Pettis-Seekins, and I am the Assistant General Manager for Policy at the MBTA, and I'll be walking through the proposals and giving you more details and some background information. So first off, Forging Ahead is what we're calling this initiative to really preserve our essential service in the middle of this crisis, as the Vice Chair mentioned. And to do that, it's a three-pronged approach. Tonight, we're mostly focused on service, but we wanted to let you know that that was our last resort. First, we started looking at our own internal cost expenditures to try to see where we could save resources internally that wouldn't affect operations. The second has been a look at our capital program to see how we can reallocate a limited amount of funds from capital projects into the operating budget to address our budget deficit. And the third is the service proposals that we're going to be talking through tonight. We are being driven while we're responding to this crisis by our goal to also look ahead and to make sure that we can help the region recover and that we can continue to build on all of the great work that the MBTA has been doing over the past 5 years to improve our capital program and our capital spending, to sort of envision how we could be a better network for the future. And so all of that work continues and has been embedded into this presentation. First, I wanted to give like a quick background on the MBTA budget, just to give a sense of perspective. So the MBTA operating budget is approximately $2.3 billion a year. Of that, $1.7 billion is the operating expense. The other part of the budget is our debt and debt principal and interest payments. So our budget goes to wages and to pay our contractors who provide services and materials. And so this slide is showing sort of how those budget categories break down. So right now, we are projecting for, in one of our scenarios of how our ridership could return in the next 2 years, a budget deficit of approximately $579 million. And so we are taking steps now to address that in this fiscal year and into our coming fiscal year. And so the way that we're thinking about it, as I said, there's three potential sources of funding. This pie chart on this chart is showing how we're thinking about the potential allocation between those fundings. So the blue is the capital reallocation, which would be the largest share under our proposals. And then the green is the programmatic internal savings, and the orange is the service changes. Just to give a sense of perspective, we're proposing to close the budget gap majority through non-service changes. On this next slide, it shows how our ridership has how it fell and then how it's recovered since the beginning of the pandemic. In this chart, we're showing by mode. So at the top, where we've seen the most ridership recovery, is bus, our paratransit service, the Ride, and our blue subway line. And then below that, you can see there's a cluster of lines, which are the orange and the red and the green line. And at the bottom of the chart, in terms of the lowest ridership right now, is on the commuter rail and the ferry service, and this is as a percent of our pre-COVID ridership. So right now, we're approximately serving 330,000 trips a weekday. In comparison, a year ago, in September, we were serving 1.26 million trips a day, and we're still running approximately the same amount of service. So as I mentioned, we are using scenario planning to think about how the region and our ridership might recover. And so we, together with MassDOT, created 3 different scenarios looking at how travel patterns might change, how the economy might recover, and how we might recover from the pandemic. And from this, we projected out ridership on each of our modes to think about how we can make sure that in our planning, we're planning to be able to carry the number of riders that could return. And so what this chart shows is that we expect ridership to return differently across all of our modes, as we've seen already play out during the pandemic, and that it won't be uniform across the modes and also across the routes. And then we also know that we want to take into account changes that we were already wanting to make as part of our planning for bus network redesign and Rail Vision, which are two of our longer range planning projects, to make sure that we're better serving our communities and our riders as we recover from this crisis. So forging ahead is really an iterative process, and we're on step one. And what we're focused on preserving our essential services, and we're looking for feedback tonight on how we're defining that and what we're proposing. Any changes would not go into effect until next year, and most of them were not going to effect until the spring or summer of next year. And our thinking is that we will continue doing this process of looking at how ridership is recovering and add back service in an iterative response to ridership and demand. And we do this on a regular basis. So first, quickly, I want to explain our framework for essential services. So what we did at the beginning of this process is we created a framework thinking about two different axes. One was transit critical population. So where are the riders who are most dependent on public transit, which includes low-income populations, communities of color, and zero to low vehicle households. And then we also did an additional screen for seniors and people with disabilities. And then on the other axes, we have ridership. So where we are seeing high ridership or project there to be high ridership, and where we are seeing low ridership. And so we've divided all of our services into these 4 boxes based on their ridership and the demographics of the people traveling in those areas. And the top box of high ridership, high transit critical populations is what we're calling essential services. And in that box falls all of our rapid transit lines, many of our bus routes, approximately 80 of our bus routes, the Fairmont Commuter Rail line. And then the other bus routes and commuter rail lines are effectively distributed across the other boxes and the areas as well. And so the goal of this process is to preserve the service in the essential service box at our service delivery policy levels, which is the minimum standard of service that this board set back in 2017 that we considered to be good service across the different modes. So it varies by bus and commuter rail and subway. So that sets the hours of operation and the frequency of service. And so this is the framework we're using to sort of guide our decision making. And as I mentioned before, what we're doing now is taking feedback. We will then be bringing the feedback and changes to the proposals to the board on December 7th for their consideration. And changes would be implemented throughout next calendar year, depending on the modes. So some commuter rail changes could happen in January, but the bulk of them would happen in May. On the ferry, it would likely happen in March. Changes to rapid transit could start in March, and likely on bus, we would start changes in June, or late June at the beginning of our new school year, which starts July 1. So this is the timeline for how any changes might take effect. So now I'm going to walk through what our proposed changes are. So going back to the framework, we're proposing to preserve the services that are in the essential service box, and then at the service delivery policy level or above, and then that we're proposing to also preserve a reduced level of service on services in the other boxes. And so that is what we're calling the base service, which is the essential services plus the other services we're planning on preserving. And so the base service proposal includes all of the essential services as well as lower frequencies on the other, commuter rail, the other bus routes, and potentially changes to the hours of operation as well. Under this proposal, most MBTA service is preserved, especially for those passengers that are currently traveling now. So on a weekday now, 82% of our trips are being taken on what we're calling essential services, where we're trying to preserve as much service as possible. 18% of trips are being taken on the non-essential services. And in this proposal, about 3% of current trips would potentially lose access or have to divert to a different mode. The proposal represents 85% of our current bus service hours, so that's the number of vehicle hours we run, 70% of our rapid transit, 65% of our commuter rail service, and it proposes to temporarily suspend all ferry service. In this proposal, the percentage of households within the MBTA service area that would lose access within a half mile of the MBTA goes from previously 82% down to 78.5%. So we recognize that some households would lose access to MBTA services within a half mile. So this is a blow up of the map for this region. The blue are routes that would see minor changes potentially to their frequency, but would be preserved at the service delivery policy standards. The orange routes would see potentially larger changes, and the red routes are where we would be proposing to eliminate service. So for this region, so this is the list of all of the bus routes that we are considering to be essential, where we would preserve service at or above the baseline levels of service. So that includes in gray on this chart, we have the key bus routes. For example, the bus route 1, bus route 66 we would keep their frequency at or above our service delivery policy standards. For route eliminations in this region, we're proposing to eliminate the 52, the 68, the 72, the 79, the 80, but only after the Green Line extension opens, the 107, the 351, and the 505. We're proposing peak service only on the 67, and we're proposing to consolidate the 62 and the 76, the 78 and the 84, the 88 and the 90 after the Green Line extension opens, the 501 and the 503, and the 502 and the 504. And then we're proposing to shorten the E line of the Green Line at Brigham Circle, and then the 553, 554, 556, and 558 at Newton Corner. So these are the sort of major changes in the region, but I will go through now and explain at the mode level the thinking. So on the commuter rail, really quickly, this chart is showing our previous ridership in the dotted line and our current ridership in the solid line. We have significantly lost our peak ridership. There continues to be service or ridership throughout the day, but really dropping off late at night. And so we're at about approximately 13% of our previous pre-COVID ridership. And so on the commuter rail, we are proposing to stop all service after 9 p.m., except on the Fairmont line where we would have service later. Stop weekend service, except for on the Fairmont line where we would replace the service by a bus, and decrease our peak frequency and retain some midday service on the commuter rail lines, but reduce from 505 trains to 430 trains, which is essentially keeping 85% of weekday commuter rail service. We were proposing to close 6 out of 141 of our commuter rail bus stops, or sorry, commuter rail stations, based on low ridership and availability of alternatives. Right now, we do not have the exact line-by-line schedules. We are waiting till we have more ridership and understand better how the service is recovering before we would put in place the exact schedules across the lines. On the bus, we have about 41% of our pre-COVID ridership. This chart is showing that we have seen a reduction, but there still remains some peak for where we have more service, or sorry, more trips at the peaks. We have seen significant variation across the routes. Some routes, like the 111, are above 60% of their pre-COVID ridership, and some routes, like the ASL2, are at 20% of their pre-COVID ridership. And we have significantly added service on some routes where we are seeing more demand. So there are some routes that have more service that we're running today than we were running pre-COVID. We do see ridership dropping off late at night. So at a glance, we're proposing on the bus to stop service after midnight, but not change the start of service, since we still see ridership in the mornings. To change the frequency on our essential bus routes, 5% across all of those routes. Some routes will see no changes, and some routes will see some frequency changes. Really, again, depends on ridership. Then on the non-essential bus routes, we will see larger frequency changes, again, depending on ridership on the route. And then, like I mentioned, some routes will be eliminated, shortened, or consolidated. We're also proposing to eliminate the suburban subsidy program, which impacts Bedford, Beverly, Burlington, Lexington, and Mission Hill. And we recognize that these bus changes do have an impact on the ride, which is our paratransit service. And so under this proposal, about 1.1% of pre-COVID ride trips would shift from what is called our ADA service to our premium service. So they would still have service, but the fare would be higher. Again, all of these changes are reviewed quarterly and adjusted as well to account for crowding. On rapid transit, we are seeing approximately 24% of pre-COVID ridership, but it does vary by line, with the blue line having the highest ridership at about 37%. Again, still seeing some peak service, but spread out across the day, and then a decline late at night. We are currently running almost all of our rapid transit service. So we're proposing to stop service after midnight, which is about a 1-hour shift in time, and reduce the frequency by approximately 20%, although all of the headways or the frequencies for trains would remain above our baseline standards. And the implementation of this would vary depending on the line based on ridership. So again, fewer changes might be expected on the blue line. And then to, as I mentioned before, stop the E line of the green line at Brigham Circle and replace that with the 39 bus. So just giving a sense, for example, the orange line currently has a 6.5-minute headway at peak and a 10-minute headway off peak. We would be proposing an 8-minute peak headway and a 12.5-minute off peak headway to get a sense of what the headway changes might be based on this proposal on rapid transit. Finally, on the ferry, we're proposing to suspend the ferry service, given that there are alternatives. For the Charlestown ferry, the alternative is the 93 bus route, where we do currently have capacity, but we will continue to monitor that. And on the Hingham and Hull ferry, the Greenbush line on the commuter rail is the alternative. So we want to get feedback on the proposals, but we also want to get feedback on how we should build back from this proposal. So how we should be prioritizing either adding service back into the base now, or if we were to get an additional source of revenue, how we should prioritize the adding service back should that happen. And so what we've done is we've sort of clustered together all of the different changes that we're making, so that we can sort of think about like which levers we should pull. So whether that's frequency, adding back evening, late night service on the commuter rail and the rapid transit, adding back frequency on the bus routes and the evening service on the bus routes, adding back partial ferry service. And we're also thinking about, are there ways that we can continue to advance our thinking on both Real Vision and bus network redesign in terms of new service or new service patterns that we know the region needs. So those are all part of our service packages that we want to get your feedback on as well about how we should be prioritizing. So these are the types of questions that would be sort of useful for us to hear. We want to hear any of your comments, but in particular, does the framework make sense in terms of how we're prioritizing essential services? Which of the proposed changes would have the most impact to you? Are there impacts are there changes we could make that would restore your access, and how we should be prioritizing adding back as resources and ridership returns? So I'll return the mic to Angel to explain how to ask questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel, for the presentation. As a reminder, we will first answer clarifying questions, then open the floor for comments and testimonials. If you have a clarifying question on the presentation, please type it into the chat pod now. Other questions and comments are welcome in the chat pod, but we will only be answering clarifying questions aloud. All comments are part of the meeting record and will be shared with MBTA leadership. If you're an elected official who would like to make a public comment, kindly rename yourself with your affiliation so I know what to call on you. You can rename yourself by clicking on the 3 ellipses next to your name and clicking rename. I'd also like to recognize other members of the MBTA team that are here today as well. Next slide, please. To make a comment, you must virtually raise your hand. To do this on the computer, please press Alt-Y or click the Raise Hand button under the Participants tab at the bottom center of your screen. On a mobile device, tap the Raise Hand button on the bottom center of your screen. On the phone, dial *9. Once you raise your hands, you'll be added to a queue with others who have raised their hands. I will call on folks first on a first-come, first-served basis. When it is your turn to speak, I will say your last name or the last 4 digits of your phone number and let you know that I am unmuting you. If you are on a computer or mobile device, a box will pop up at the center of your screen. You will need to confirm you would like to be unmuted before you begin speaking. If you're on the phone, an automated recording will let you know that you are unmuted. You may speak as soon as the recording finishes. Once you're unmuted, everyone in the meeting can hear you. Before making your comment, please slowly state your name and any organizational affiliation. Please remember to speak slowly as we have interpreters working with us this evening. Please limit all comments to no more than 2 minutes. We ask that you only make 1 comment at a time so we can ensure that everyone and others get a chance to speak. If you have any additional comments, please raise your hand again. As soon as you are finished, you will be muted again. You may also post comments in the chat and we will document them as part of the meeting record. We thank you for joining us today, and I will now be answering clarifying questions. The first clarifying question is the slide presentation being shown right now available as a single download on the page at Forging Ahead, but not a consolidated file exactly where it is being shown now? Laura, I guess I could take this. This will be recorded, and this is part of the official record, and it will be provided on the website, mbta.com/forgingahead. The next clarifying question that we received, where can we see the route-by-route proposed schedules so that people can determine the impact?
That's an excellent question. We have not developed route-by-route proposed schedules yet. Right now, we are seeking feedback on the framework and the sort of potential magnitude of changes. We will once we get feedback on that and we move to the next step, we'll be looking at as much ridership data as we can before we make any changes. So we want to see how ridership continues to come back before we propose the exact proposed schedule by bus route or by commuter rail line. And so those should be available next year once we have more additional information.
Thank you. The next clarifying question is, which are considered essential bus routes?
Sure, I see there's been a couple questions about this. So what we did to determine which bus routes were considered to be essential is, again, we looked at whether or not they had high ridership, and that is high ridership during COVID or pre-COVID. And then also if they were serving areas where low-income, people of color, and zero to low vehicle households travel. And so because we don't currently have demographic data on the existing riders who are traveling right now, we used a data set that could show us where people are traveling in general, to make sure that we're capturing those population groups. So the low-income households, the people of color, and the zero to low vehicle households. And so then we classified all of the routes across commuter rail lines, subway lines, bus routes, based on how they fell into both of those, against both of those variables, into the essential and non-essential services.
Thank you, Laurel. The next question is somewhat similar, I guess, in scope. Clarifying question, what is meant by consolidating routes?
Sure, I'll turn that to, I believe Melissa Dulay is I'm gonna go with Senior Director of Plans and Schedules, is available to answer questions again tonight as well. Melissa, are you here?
Certainly. So it depends. In some cases, like with the consolidation of the 6276, it's actually very similar to the temporary emergency schedules that we just started running in the end of August of this year. So in that case, it was taking largely what was the combined Saturday route and putting them together. In other cases, like the case of the 7884, that consolidation is sort of simplifying the 78, which did a different thing during rush hours. It was coming from Arlington Center during rush hours and omitting the Arlemont neighborhood. In that case, we've actually suspended the 84, but we've replaced the connectivity to the Arlemont neighborhood during rush hours by having the 78 serve Arlemont during rush hours. So that connects people to the red line still. It doesn't go to Alewife. It instead goes to Harvard, like the 78 had previously done for the rest of the day. So in that case, it kind of simplifies the service pattern and runs one consistent pattern all day, regardless of time of day, and still maintains service to everybody who was formerly on the route in that case, either from the Arlemont side or from the Arlington Heights and Park Ave side. In other cases, there are some that aren't things that we're currently doing already on an emergency basis. So one of the proposed consolidations was for the 88 and 90 in Somerville to get consolidated after the Green Line extension opens. So in that case, we'd be planning to eliminate the 88 bus, but to maintain the connectivity to like the Highland Ave corridor from the Clarendon Hill area. The 90 would be extended to Clarendon Hill to pick up that portion of the 88 that is not served by the 90. And then at the same time, we would also look to improve the Route 90's frequency to be approximately the same as that by the 88, because we recognize that those have different frequencies today. So there would still be a Highland Ave connection, but for anybody who's continuing to Lechmere Station or connecting to the Green Line, the expectation is that people would either walk directly from places in Somerville, or they would have to connect from the 90 bus at one of the new GLX stations. So those are some examples of the different types of consolidation we have proposed.
Thank you, Melissa. The next clarifying question was, when will we start to see preliminary schedules on impacted bus route lines?
Melissa, do you want to answer that as well?
Certainly. So Laurel touched on this a little bit previously. we haven't constructed new schedules for each of these, so they would be publicly released in the weeks for implementation of these changes for the ones that haven't already been implemented on an emergency basis. Though we'll have some better ideas of what those are in, at least in some cases, for some of the frequency adjustments. We are trying to kind of flesh out what some of those are, at least given the ridership numbers that we know today. So we'll work on a timeline for being able to kind of give a bit more detail, especially for some of the frequency modifications that we've been discussing as part of this process.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like it's a three-step process. So right now we're getting feedback on, are these the right types of changes to be making? And then we will have more information on the sort of the frequency levels that would be proposed on the lines and the routes. And then finally, before any implementation, we would release the exact what time does the bus get to the bus stop level schedules. So as we get more information, we'll be able to make better decisions on all three of these stages, basically, of the process.
Thank you. The next clarifying question that I have on my list here is, will there be another public meeting once the specific routes are publicly available? Will any final decisions be made prior to the presentation of specific route schedules?
So yeah, we will make decisions before the exact schedules are finalized. As I mentioned, that's the last step in the process that requires our service schedulers to actually route out exactly all the bus movements. So I think there will definitely be information released before that about, once we go through sort of these three stages, about getting more information about frequencies, and then we will release the schedules before they're implemented.
There was also a question regarding capital projects. Will capital projects, specifically the downtown cross and accessibility improvements, be delayed?
Sure, I can speak at a high level to the process we're undergoing on the capital projects. So we are proposing to pause a limited number of capital projects, and we use the framework to identify those based on the type of capital project and the whether those services were high ridership or low ridership. And I cannot speak specifically to the downtown crossing accessibility improvements. Any project that is currently underway is not being paused, and all pause projects are temporary until we undergo our comprehensive capital improvement planning process, which will kick off in the spring to rethink the budgeting for all of our capital projects. So no changes are permanent to the capital plan.
Thank you, Laurel. And then there was a question, is there a list of routes considered essential? I think that there's some in the appendix on this presentation, which is available.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So when we post the slide deck, there's a slide that I showed that has all of the routes that are considered essential. And it's also available on our website. Currently, if you go to the Forging Ahead page and you look at the drop down for bus, there's a slide deck that's linked in that drop down that has the slides that show the bus slides that I showed today, and that has a list of all of the essential bus routes.
Okay. And then the last clarifying question I have here, for the non-essential bus routes without major structural changes, what does significantly reduced frequency throughout the day mean?
Sure, Melissa, do you want to take this question?
So on the non-essential bus routes, on average, we were costing that out to assume 20% across the board set of cuts for all the routes in that category, but that might vary by time of day or by which route that we're looking at, just because of the the numbers of buses that we have on the line, say you have 2 buses operating at peak, it's very difficult to cut 20% off of 2 when you can only change, whole numbers of buses. So that's one of those details that we're working on finalizing, what exactly that impact means for the frequency on any one route. And obviously we're also looking at trying to look at ridership and crowding levels. So there might be some routes where we might cut deeper or some that we cut less deep depending on the loads that we're seeing. So this is trying to look at a number of different factors all at the same time. So it's not just so clean as saying, it's a even 20% across the board.
Thank you, Melissa. That is the list of clarifying questions that I have. As a reminder, we're going to move on now to the public comment and testimonial parts of today's meeting. I am going to begin with the elected officials first, and then we'll move on to the public. As a reminder, I would ask the remarks be kept brief so that others have an opportunity to speak as well today. So with that, I am going to ask Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller of Newton to, I'm going to unmute you, and then you can provide your remarks. Madam Mayor.
There we go. Thank you to Chair Aiello and Vice Chair Tibbetts-Nuts and Director Lane. Good to see you. Thank you for hosting these meetings. I'm Ruth Ann Fuller, the mayor of the city of Newton, and I know I'm joined in this Zoom land by a whole slew of our city councilors and a number of the city of Newton transportation planners. Many of you probably know that Newton is a city of villages filled with neighbors, people who live and work here, striving to welcome those who might like to live or work here. But to be truly welcoming and inclusive, we actually need more service from the MBTA, not less. The MBTA team has been very thorough in its approach, but unfortunately not thoughtful enough or sufficiently compassionate. I am deeply concerned about both the short and long-term impacts of the proposed service reductions on people. The cuts will hurt seniors, youngsters, those without access to cars, and employees, and have a disproportionate impact on those with tight budgets and essential workers, both of whom those groups are already struggling during this pandemic. Without frequent public transit, reviving our economy will be even more difficult, and doing it equitably will be near impossible. The cuts will undermine Newton's and the region's longer-term goals for climate change, housing, economic development, and congestion. I'll also say that in the last 2 years, our city has approved 2 of the largest mixed-use transit-oriented development in our history at Northland and Riverside. And these developments will bring 1,300 new housing units, over 200 of which will be affordable, as well as an estimated 1,000 additional jobs, and were designed to minimize new vehicle trips. But their success depends on having robust MBTA service. At a minimum, any pandemic-related MBTA service reductions must be short-term, ending when the virus is controlled. And ironically, we just got the really good news in the last few weeks about promising vaccines, but the herd immunity may be achieved shortly after your proposed cuts are implemented. In addition, you've laid out some previously planned capital investments in Newton, and we need them. These include upgrading Newton's 3 commuter rail stations and the Newton Highlands Green Line to be accessible. And you also had laid out a great rail vision plan, and if we get it done at the highest level, it makes all the difference in the world here. They're desperately needed. We also, just in terms of clarification, if I'd love to ask Angel or whoever it is, just when you can, clarify whether design work has been suspended right now, because we were marching towards the 30% design levels on some of these important projects. Will you continue to 30%? Love to know when you get a chance. Your draft proposal also includes restructuring and or shortening important bus routes in Newton. The 553, 554, 556, and 558, and the consolidation of 501, 502, 503, and 504. This hurts. Newtonians also depend on the ride. You've got to keep that going robustly. And here's where I really want everybody to listen particularly carefully, and I'll end with this. Of all the short-term changes proposed for Newton, I'm most concerned with the proposal to eliminate, not cut, not reduce, but eliminate bus routes 52 and 505. Route 52 is the only bus that operates through Newton Center that travels north-south. It connects Watertown Square to Newton Center and then into Dedham. Route 505 provides express bus service between Auburndale and West Newton to Boston with multiple stops in Newton. I strongly urge that the MBTA maintain service along the 52 and 505 during this pandemic and fully restore service on all lines once the pandemic is under control. To close, cutting costs when it means isolating people in need is not the right way forward. I am so grateful to each of you. I know the trade-offs you're contemplating are difficult, but I invite any of you to join me on the 52 or the 505 to see why these routes matter so much to Newtonians. And I ask you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, if you're an elected official, I would ask that you raise your hand and I can take you in first. And a reminder to keep our remarks brief so that we have enough time for others who would like to say a few words as well. Next, I am going to call on State Representative Tommy Vitolo. I'm going to unmute you now, Representative.
Thank you. My name is Representative Tommy Vitolo. I represent Brookline. And I want to thank the MBTA and the advisory board. You've been asked to perform an awful task that goes against every reason you got into this line of business. I also want to thank Shannon Wright and Kara Schwartz, the ASL providers. And thank you to Arizona Iced Tea, still offering 23 fluid ounces for only 99 cents. My district has more rail platforms than any other in the House. We all have the C line, we're on the D, and we have over a half a dozen B line stops within a block or two as well. My community also relies heavily on the 47, 50, 160, 65, and 66, all serving Brookline, as well as some places, some routes that aren't in Brookline, but we use quite a bit, including the Red Line, the 1, 39, 86, and the E line Riverway stop. And I understand the importance of the MBTA personally, as my family of 4 does not own a car. Pre-pandemic, my wife was a Green Line to Red Line or Green Line to Walk commuter, and I often found myself on the Green Line to get to my job in Beacon Hill, but also the Red Line, the 1, 47, 65, and 66 to make my way around the district and Boston Metro. My 6 and 10-year-old children regularly rode the 65 to and from school, practice, the library, and our home. Many of my colleagues in the legislature have pushed back against service cuts, correctly arguing that these cuts will really hurt residents of the region, and they're 100% right. Further, no matter how hard the MBTA works to minimize the harm, and I believe that the T really is seeking to do just that, the harm will be real and considerable, and it may also be permanent. just as cuts to the A line and the E line and several other now disappeared transit services over the years began as temporary. And to that end, I'm strongly opposed to reducing the E line back to Brigham Circle, as well as the elimination of ferry service, which doesn't frankly directly impact my district at all. The symptom is that fare revenue is insufficient to carry the budget, but the illness is that the MBTA relies so heavily on fares in the first place. Consider this: if buses were free pre-pandemic, then the reduction in ridership on buses would have resulted in no loss of revenue. Paradoxically, reducing transit fares would make the MBTA more resilient in the face of ridership reduction. So now what? As I said earlier, many of my colleagues have pushed back against service cuts. My colleagues in the House have presented an alternative 8 months ago. Increased transportation funds through a combination of a 5-cent gas tax increase, increased Uber and Lyft fees, a rental car company tax increase, and an increase in corporate taxes, particularly on large corporations. But anyone who watches Schoolhouse Rocks knows that it takes 2 legislative branches to tango. And unfortunately, my colleagues in the Senate have refused to bring the transportation revenue package to a vote. And here we are. The T and the regional transit authorities don't have enough money to maintain services. The executive branch is no help either. Not only did the governor threaten to veto the House transportation revenue package, his budget offered no alternative source of funds for the T. And we all know what the current president and Republican-led US Senate think about mass transit and their perception of the people who rely on it. I have no doubt that every single person on this call agrees that we've got to pay the MBTA operators, maintenance crew, and every other employee fair wages for their work. Without the money to pay them, the MBTA has no choice but to reduce the hours that they work. And so here we are, fighting amongst ourselves to preserve our share of reduced services, every single one of which is essential for the resident of our Commonwealth who relies on that seat. So I sure hope the right people figure out that we must properly fund transit and allow it to blossom, rather than withhold resources and watch as it withers on the vine. Again, I apologize to my friends who work at the MBTA and who work for the MBTA Advisory Board. You've been put in an awful position, and this goes against everything you want to achieve. And I'm sorry that we are in this position, and hope that we can find the right people to find the money to pay for transit that everybody deserves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. Next, I'm going to unmute Representative Mike Connolly. Representative, I believe you are unmuted.
Well, thank you, Angel, and thank you to the members of the Fiscal Management and Control Board and to the MBTA staff for organizing this evening's public meeting. I want to echo the concerns that we heard from my colleague, Representative Vitolo, as well as the mayor of the city of Newton. You know, I appreciate the thought that you're putting into this, but I think as legislators, it's our job to push back and really question the overall vision of implementing transit service cuts in the middle of a pandemic. I came before the board on November 9th to speak out in opposition to these transit cuts. And frankly, it's unbelievable to me that we are having this conversation about not only cutting service, but also delaying or abandoning hundreds of millions of dollars in capital investment on an annual basis. And that will happen when we divert capital investment funds to cover operating expenses. I'm really proud of the fact that the district that I represent in Cambridge and Somerville includes the red line, the green line, and the orange line, along with several bus routes. But I'm concerned about the proposed changes to the 68 bus between Harvard and Kendall. I'm concerned that the 80 bus runs through East Somerville. And I'd like to understand more about the additional proposed changes. As many folks said in the comments, would really like to see these schedules and understand what we're facing. I understand the drop-off in ridership has occurred in the wake of the pandemic, and that is what has brought us to this point. But let's remember that for months, the governor has been pushing us forward with this reopening. So I don't see how, on the one hand, we're pushing everyone back to work. We have these vaccines on the horizon, and we can look forward to a day where our economy will get going again, and how, on the other hand, we could be cutting transit service. Moreover, if there was ever a time where having some underutilization of services made sense, it would be in this time of global pandemic. If the trains and the buses aren't completely overcrowded right now, then that's probably a good thing. That excess capacity allows for social distancing. So on both sides of this coin, in the present, we need more space for social distancing. And once we get through this pandemic, we know we have the nation's worst traffic. We know that we have many, many billions of dollars in maintenance backlog. And the plan that is unfortunately before us right now doesn't do much to address any of that. You know, I appreciate that you're using words like equity and essential service, but I would submit that, you know, for virtually every MBTA rider, especially our essential workers and lower income folks, the MBTA is essential. When people get on the bus, when people get on the subway, they're making that choice because they need to get from point A to point B. And so it's hard for me to imagine how many cuts could be made that truly won't cut into essential services. As Rep. Vitolo mentioned, I'm a supporter of moving toward free public transportation. And so I would like to see us take this opportunity to consider, how do we make more bus routes free? How do we lower bus fares? And if the revenues aren't covering the operating expenses, then how can we raise additional revenue to cover that gap rather than cutting services? Close to wrapping up here, I just want to reiterate again the concern around using capital funds for operating expenses. My understanding is we've been down this road before. I thought it was a big step forward when the MBTA was able to move away from that practice of using the capital funds for operating expenses. I'm very concerned that with a maintenance backlog that is many billions of dollars deep, that this move is going to set us back and put us in a place that it will be very hard to recover from. I'd also note that it was reported this week in the Boston Globe that even if the federal government delivers another big round of financial relief, it's been reported that the MBTA may go forward with these cuts anyways. To me, that raises a lot of questions about what the agenda is here. An additional concern is for the workers. You know, what happens to the individuals who are laid off as a result of this plan? Where is the equity in that for them? So, you know, in closing, I would continue to advocate for expanded service, for lower cost service, and we need to call on the legislature to do its part to raise new progressive revenue. As Rep. Vitolo mentioned, we in the House took a major vote earlier this year to deliver hundreds of millions of dollars in additional revenue to the MBTA. Unfortunately, our colleagues in the Senate haven't joined us in that effort. More recently, last week during the House budget, I brought forward a proposal to raise $1.7 billion in progressive new revenue. What we need for constituents and for members of the public who are listening, talk to your state legislators and ask them to get involved and to come up with a way to pay for this service and to stop these cuts. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to continuing this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Next, I am going to unmute Rep-elect Steve Owens. Representative-elect, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi there, Steve Owens, Representative-elect for the 29th Middlesex District, which is most of Watertown and parts of West and North Cambridge, an area that is very much impacted by bus reductions in bus service. I am glad that the MBTA is taking into account the transit critical routes and taking in, looking through a justice lens on some of this, but I just want to echo the comments of the people before me. Transit is critical to those riders who are taking it right now, especially right now. These are people who mostly don't have another choice. The people who I see riding the 71 bus at 11:45 at night, they're not riding it for fun. They're not riding it coming home from a bar. The bars are all closed. They're riding it because they need that service. It's their only option. And when we start reducing that service and taking it away, we are going to be impacting them the most. I want to echo also the timing of these cuts seems extremely short-sighted, especially now, and especially when people are making their transit decisions as we go forward. We're baking in these changes right when we all expect an opening of the economy. People are making these decisions, and with the consolidation of the express buses in particular, the cuts on the 71 and the 73 buses potentially, the consolidation of the elimination rather of the 72 and the reduced service potentially on the 71. People are we need to be looking at these in our climate goals as well. People are going to be making decisions. If they can't rely on these buses because they can't get to work on time, they're going to be mode switching. They'll be switching to cars where they can. We're going to be increasing the traffic. We're going to be increasing emissions as we go forward with worse service. I also want to make sure that we are taking into account frequencies along parallel routes. If we're eliminating the 72 and reducing service on the 75, does that mean that Huron Village has a quarter of the buses it has pre-pandemic? I don't have any evidence that, I don't have a lot of trust that those services are being considered at the street level rather than at the route level. I want to echo Mayor Fuller's call to not eliminate the 52. It's the only way to get from Watertown Square to Newton Center without going either all the way into Boston and back, or all the way out to Waltham and a very complicated way back to Newton Center. Looking forward to working with my future colleagues, Representatives Vitolo and Connolly, on fare-free buses. But for the short term, I really believe that this is the wrong way to go about these service cuts. I think that we are going to have a situation where we have a transit system that we won't be able to rely on just as we need to rely on it the most. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this. And that's all I have.
Got 2 more offices, and we will be going forward. Just to remind folks again to keep the remarks brief so that others may be able to speak. I'm going to unmute Cambridge City Councilor Wheeler, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Brad Rawson from the Mayor's office in Cambridge. Councilor, I am unmuting you now.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who turned out for this evening. I'm June Sabrina Wheeler. I'm a Cambridge City Councilor at large, and I'm also chair of the Transportation Committee for the City Council. I'm really disappointed to see these cuts proposed. I understand the bus service cuts being focused on lower ridership routes, but the folks who are still taking public transit in the middle of the pandemic, as Representative Steve Owens said, are people who don't have any other options. They don't have cars, they're often essential workers, and they have to work in person. When so many of us are able to work from home, they are still going in every day, or they're having to get to doctor's appointments, or they're having to pick up groceries by bus because they don't have other options. Cutting rapid transit and subway trips as well is going to make it harder for essential workers to get to work. It's also going to make cars more crowded on the T, because fewer trips and longer headways means more people packing into the subways, even as we're still trying to fight this virus, and we are for probably the next year. I'm really concerned about the frequency being significantly reduced on the 71, the 73, and the 77 routes, which we know Cambridge residents depend on. I also have major concerns about the plans to get rid of zero emissions electric trolley buses in Cambridge. As a couple of the city reps have said, we know this is a revenue issue. And I'm really glad they're working on proposals to make up those gaps at the state level. As for Cambridge, I've said repeatedly in conversations with MBTA staff, come to cities like Cambridge that have the resources to help fill these gaps rather than just cutting service for residents who depend on it most. The city council has directed our city manager to work with the T to fund fare free routes in the city. We could provide the revenue as a city to help make up for some of these gaps, and at the same time help our residents who are really feeling the burden of not having income for public transit right now. The other point wanting to raise is just needing to understand the social distancing standards that the T is trying to uphold at this time, and how these cuts are going to impact it. We need to understand how the T is understanding the science and really get an understanding of how these cuts are going to impact ridership. So thank you all for listening, and I hope we can change some of these plans.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to now unmute Mr. Brad Rawson from the Mayor's Office in Somerville. Brad.
Thank you, Angel. Good evening, everybody. Thank you to the MBTA staff and board for doing the hard work to engage us as your customers, as your stakeholders. My name is Brad Ross, and I'm a Somerville resident, and I'm here on behalf of Mayor Joe Curtatone, who couldn't join us this evening due to other meetings happening simultaneously. But Mayor Joe has been a thought leader on so many issues related to supporting our partners at the MBTA and making sure that it works not only for our little city of 80,000 people and 4 square miles, but for an entire region of 4.5 million people. For my friends and advocates from Somerville who have taken time out of their days tonight to actually join, please understand that our staff are working around the clock in partnership with MBTA to understand and advocate for Somerville mobility. Having said that, Mayor Joe is a regionalist, and he serves as chair of the Metropolitan Mayors Coalition. He represents 21 inner core cities and towns at the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization. And the message he asked me to bring tonight is a regional one. It is very important that all of us maintain a coalition advocating for transit, for justice, for equity, for sustainability around Eastern Massachusetts. It is very important that we continue to recognize that we have hardworking, altruistic public servants in staff roles and board roles at the MBTA. And our job as advocates and stakeholders tonight should be thinking about ways that we can add resources to the budgets that they are trying to fill gaps on desperately. I appreciate the comments that I've heard from Mayor Fuller, from McConnelly and his colleagues in the Massachusetts House. We all should be working with our elected officials on Beacon Hill to try to secure emergency funding for an essential public good. And yes, the magnitude of need is large. There is a regional housing emergency, a regional healthcare emergency, but without reliable mass transit, none of these things function well. So let's stay together. Let's make sure that we don't slip into the temptation of parochial advocacy, because we need all of these routes to serve as the backbone of a modern transit-focused regional economy. Credit to the MBTA for working on a bus network redesign project that I have had the privilege of serving on an external task force on. We want to make sure that we are understanding the trade-offs associated with building a new bus network around the metropolitan region. Credit to the MBTA for figuring out how to scale up capital investments while modernizing operations. We don't want you folks to backslide. And if we get into fighting over the scraps, I'm afraid that that reality will come to pass. Please hold us accountable as your partners to keep working to generate the resources you need to preserve not only essential, but also the next generation of transit investments in the Commonwealth. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I am now going to unmute Mr. Alan Motenko. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. I am going to unmute you now. Mr. Motenko, the floor is yours.
You said that right. Thanks very much, and I hope you can hear me. First, I want to echo others and say that I recognize that this is a thankless task put upon you as a result of the pandemic, and so I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about it this evening. I want to ask you to consider revising the plan for the Newton Express buses, including the 556 and 558 that I rely on. As a person with a disability who's unable to drive. These buses are my lifeline to work and socialization. Running these routes to Newton Corner is better than eliminating them entirely, which I appreciate. But these routes are designed to run to Boston, and my sense is that most of my fellow riders take these buses to Boston directly, or at least they did pre-pandemic. Syncing up trips from Newton Corner to the 502 or the 504 can be a challenge on a good day, and more than a challenge on a more difficult day. So keeping a few trips per day direct to and from Boston would seemingly preserve the important route, but still make some concessions to the realities that I understand this is driven by. So I would ask you to look at perhaps adding a couple of express trips a day. I also want to put a word in for commuter rail service. Late evening and weekend commuter rail service in particular is vital for those of us like me that depend on the T as their primary means of getting around. And lastly, I share the concern of others that life hopefully is going to return to some semblance of normal in about a year or less from now, and that service might not snap back commensurate with that. My biggest concern is that it's hard to measure a return to normal demand if the service doesn't exist to capture that demand. And I know, I think history tells us it's hard to go home again. So I would hope that you'll consider metrics beyond just usage moving forward for bringing back services that are being curtailed, because I'm not sure that's going to be the best source of evidence about the demand for the service to come back. So those are my thoughts, and thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Montango. I am next going to unmute Ms. Jess Nario. Ms. Nario, you should be unmuted.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Okay, I think it's working. So, hi, I live in Somerville. Originally, I lived out in Zone 7, so I used to take the commuter rail every day. And the commuter rail has obviously gone up in service significantly over the last 10 years, just because living in Boston or even in the greater Boston area is increasingly unaffordable. Now I'm in Somerville, so I take primarily the Orange Line and some buses when I was in work. I have the luxury to work from home. And the service originally, as indicated in some of the graphics I've seen about the frequency, was definitely not as frequent as the graphics were suggesting. At peak times, we were lucky to see a T sometimes every 10 minutes, and it was even longer at other times just because of derailments and other issues. So I can only imagine that these new times are going to be even longer, and this is going to cause even more crowding. And during a pandemic, that's certainly not what we want, is more people crowded on areas. Additionally, these cuts, I know we've talked a lot about how we want to help low income or communities of color, but these will be the communities that are affected the most. Those in lower income areas are the ones that are on bus routes, are the ones taking commuter rails, and probably are going to be the ones that are going to be on the hard end of the spectrum. We have essential workers or anyone that's not lucky enough to be working from home who's going to be adversely affected by these cuts the most. We should instead be trying to increase the funding of the T. I know there's a big deficit, but I know there's also opportunities for us to fully fund this public service. And we know that once there are cuts, there often are never times to return. So are there any parts of this plan that are going to concretize that these cuts will be revisited? I know we talked about that in the beginning of the presentation, but I certainly don't expect that these bus services will return or that these peak times will go down in intervals. And if so, will this be an excuse to just raise fares again and put that strain again on essential workers, on low wage workers, on people that aren't lucky enough to work from home? Lastly, I just want to advocate that we should be using like public money to not cut the T. We should be using the taxes from corporations, from high wage earners, and be able to fund this so that no one has to pay for the T, that we can increase service, that it can become more reliable, and we can support our essential workers and support our low wage earners. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, I am going to recognize Mr. Chris Smith from Senator Sal DiDomenico's office. Chris, I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Smith. I am from State Senator Sal DiDomenico's office. The senator wanted to be here tonight, but the Senate, it looks to be, will be probably debating well into the evening. And so he's unable to join us, but he offers the following remarks, which I will read right now. Thank you to all the transit officials here and all the elected and community members here. And thank you for the opportunity to testify. I represent among the most transit dependent districts in the entire state. My district is also home to a number of the communities hardest hit by this pandemic in the entire country, mind you, not just in Massachusetts. The Cambridge portion of my district is home to some of the biggest clusters of essential workers in the Commonwealth, from the life sciences sector, including folks working on a vaccine for COVID-19, to restaurant and hospitality sector employees, to higher education and healthcare workers. And they never stop taking the T and riding the bus. At a time when we were already asking so much of our essential workers and their families, cutting their transportation options imposes yet another hardship on our friends and neighbors who rely on public transportation. And just the Cambridge portion of my district, this plan calls for an end to a number of key linkages and moderations to the 80 and 88 bus, as well as over a dozen other routes. It also calls to end commuter rail service on evenings and weekends entirely. And you know, the commuter rail serves residents from all over my district and links our region to other parts of the state for jobs, housing, and educational opportunities. And all the while these cuts are occurring, people still need to get around. So they are going to, as a number of other folks already referenced on the call, going to be changing their behaviors. And so when we hear that service levels will be phased back in after demand picks up, one must wonder, you know, if the service is not there, inducing demand becomes very difficult. And so more broadly, we know winter is coming. People need to be able to physically distance on public transportation. The pandemic, as we know, isn't going away this year or probably even well into next year. And the workers and people still using public transit are the ones who need our support more than ever, as we know. The public health situation is probably getting worse before it is going to get better. And when it does, these service cuts will no doubt hold back our region's economic recovery at just the time when we need as many mobility options as possible to bring back lost jobs and economic activity. And so he would like to leave you with this. We were an extremely affluent yet highly systematically unequal region before the pandemic, and service cuts to the MBTA are only exacerbating that issue. So when we come out of this, we will be facing the same systemic problems. Thank you for the opportunity to offer Senator's remarks, and everybody really appreciate it.
Thank you for the comments. The next, I am going to, I'm asked to unmute Varun Balor.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I just want to make a few really brief points. I guess first, I would really like to draw attention to what I think is the undemocratic nature that the way these these decisions are being carried out. I don't feel like it makes sense that four unelected, unaccountable board members are being tasked with making a decision of this magnitude that'll affect thousands of people in the Boston area. I also, I guess I would like to say I don't appreciate the I would say that all the jargon in the world really can't mask the undemocratic nature of this decision making process. I guess much has been said about how this is our system, how we want to address systemic inequalities, but I think there's no way to do that when we're working within a system like this, which doesn't actually give us a voice. It just lets us vent, basically, because we know that the people here really have no say in what's happening. It's really only the four again, unelected, unaccountable board members who have any kind of say, who have all the power. But I also would like to raise the question of why a public service is being run like a for-profit business. I mean, we don't see meetings where, say, the fire department, I guess, comes crying that fighting fires is no longer profitable, and for that reason they need to shut down half of all the firefighting stations in the city, and says to the people whose houses are on fire, here's a bucket. I think it's totally ridiculous that that the costs of this public transportation system are being foisted on the workers of Somerville and Cambridge and Boston, instead of on the millionaires and the billionaires and the corporations who've made record profits since this pandemic started. So yeah, I would propose that instead of taxing the working class by cutting service, that we tax the rich instead, to fund public service and expand access to it. And also, I guess I would like to end on this. Again, every single speaker here comes in and sort of genuflects to this idea of solving systemic inequality, but I would propose that it's impossible to fix systemic inequality within an unequal system. I think we need to think about building a new system, a better system, instead of working within this crooked, broken system that we have. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, I am going to unmute Destina Agar.
Hi, I'm Destina. I'm a resident of Watertown. I live right on the Belmont line. I'm an essential worker. I work 2 hospital jobs. I'm also a full-time nursing student. So, I'm in school all morning and I have to get to work in the evenings. I work 3 to 11:30. If there's any healthcare workers here, I'm sure you know these 8-hour shifts, it's 7 to 3, 3 to 11:30. So when I'm getting out of work at 11:30 in Cambridge, I can't get back here to my house in Watertown, when the service is going to be cut after midnight. I rely on the 73 bus to get literally anywhere, no matter where I'm going. That's the only mode of transit that I have available. This is going to really, really negatively impact and devastate healthcare workers and really all frontline workers. We don't have the luxury of working a 9-to-5 job from home. We have to be there. We work mornings, we work evenings, we work nights, weekends, holidays. Lots of people take the commuter rail into the city, to work their hospital jobs. So cutting the service after 9 p.m. and cutting it on weekends is really going to devastate a lot of people. I'm sure that some people can afford to buy cars and they can do that. And, once things get back to normal, the traffic is going to be crazy and we're going to look like LA, where we just have a crap public transit system and you sit and stop and go traffic 24 hours of the day. And there's lots of people like myself who can't afford to get a car. In the last week, I've, looked at my budget and tried to figure out any which way I could be able to afford it. There's no overnight parking in Watertown, so I'm gonna have to pay $100 a month for parking, but there's no way. I can't do it. I have nursing school tuition to pay. I can only work a couple nights a week. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people in the same boat. And, no matter what your sentiments are, this is really going to just hit the most hard. It's going to hit people that are low income, and it's going to hit communities of color and Black and brown people. And it's just going to make things worse for these people in, a region that I think claims to be very social justice oriented, but really there's a lot of systemic racism where we live, and it's just going to worsen that. I also just want to echo Varun's statements exactly. If I could copy and paste everything that you said, I think it's absolutely absurd that, people that are unelected and unaccountable officials are making these decisions that are going to impact, the whole city of Boston. And I think that passing this would be heinous and just disgusting and disgraceful. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, I am going to unmute Ms. Suzanne Rasmussen from the City of Cambridge.
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Rasmussen. I am Director of Environmental and Transportation Planning for the City of Cambridge, and wanted to start by thanking members of the FMCB board and the MBTA for being here this evening and providing the opportunity for all of us to comment. The City of Cambridge will have specific comments on the proposals that have been put before us in terms of service cuts to the subway and the bus routes, and in certain cases, elimination of routes. But tonight, I'm going to provide primarily higher level comments. Many Cambridgians and people who work in Cambridge do not have access to or the ability to afford any other options for getting to their jobs or essential errands that they have to make, specifically including those that do not start or end at times typically considered peak commuting hours. And I think we've heard both from elected officials and residents of the region that this is a particular problem. Retaining service levels to enable transit-dependent workers to get to work is essential, but it's also critical that we continue to provide enough service so that people can physically distance and be safe while riding the T as they depend on. Service cuts, as presented, appear to be focused on weekday service and traditional peaks, or at least that's how the analysis seems to be presented. But as has been mentioned, essential businesses operate on a 7-day schedule and do not follow the typical office peaks. We just heard about hospital shift workers and what their schedules are. So it's really important that as this analysis is done of proposed cuts, schedules that are 7 days a week and follow typical shifts are really brought into focus. In addition, the service cuts are scheduled to take place with some in January and a lot in June. And we are in uncertain times. A vaccine may be widely available prior to June, and obviously these kinds of cuts should not be implemented in a post-vaccine scenario. So we ask that whatever is the cuts that are being proposed be reviewed on a regular basis, not just adopted on December 7th, and that's what we're doing in June, but that there's every month or every 2 months a real analysis and understanding of what is going on in terms of the pandemic and how it may be changing, so that we don't implement changes that will continue long after the pandemic has been brought under control by a vaccine. The projected savings appear to be based on, to be annualized. That is to say that the savings that are being represented as being achieved would only be achieved if the service cut stays in place for a year, and hopefully that is not a scenario that we're looking at. And finally, I wanted to add that we clearly support efforts to look at other opportunities, including continuing to work with state officials and federal officials to see what can be done and what potential opportunities exist for backfilling the MBTA's revenues during the pandemic, so that we don't stop or slow down large portions of the system that will take a very long time to be brought back to full service levels. Those are my comments, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to ask to unmute Terry Alther.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Just let me know when you're ready for me to start.
Yep, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So about almost 2 years ago, I came to speak at a meeting like this, where I specifically was concerned about how there's a strong neoliberal aspect within the FCMB and the MBTA at large. And tonight's presentation has basically shown to me that that is very true. And to be honest, I have to say I am very, very disappointed in what the MBTA is proposing. I live in West Newton. A lot of these cuts, while would not be fatal to my commute, could potentially be fatal. The good news is I'm out of a job right now since I'm in between work, so I can find a new job. But the bad news is once I do, and if I have to go in, this is going to make my hours very interesting. Now, traditionally, I've done campaign work, but to keep it short, I'm thinking of another job. And this, with these cuts, I'm certainly going to really rethink what kind of jobs I can apply for. But back to the topic at hand, like these cuts are serious. Like a lot of people in Newton, yes, there are people who drive cars, but one of our biggest problems right now is traffic. And as our city council president posted in the chat earlier on, like we are in a huge building drive right now where we're approving a lot of apartments because we realize that we can't just have a car-centric future. a future where basically we have even more traffic in Newton. And we also, we also realize that we have a huge climate crisis on our hands. And, to see all these cuts, happening in these communities, not just Newton, but like even like, Somerville, Arlington, even like places within Boston itself, it truly astounds me why on earth the MBTA is doing this. Like, it's one thing if the MBTA doesn't have money, and I understand that. And I actually do appreciate the MBTA posting about what exactly is needed to make sure that we don't have to deal with these cuts. And I really hope the state legislature does so. But what infuriates me is how the MBTA doesn't really seem to want to own up to this. On Sunday night, I'm full disclosure, I'm a member of my local Democratic ward committee. My state rep, Kate Kahn, came and spoke and said that literally the MBTA just dropped this bombshell right before the state house was going to vote on their budget. And that to me is extremely unacceptable, because if she had known about this, she probably would have worked to make sure that we could find a way for the state to respond to this. And there was a vote about Mike Connolly's proposal. Unfortunately, it failed, but I have a feeling that had many of these legislators known about what was going to happen, I think many of them would have voted for his proposal anyway. But now, we're at a point where, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, thankfully, our Congressman-elect Jake Auchincloss seems to understand this is a serious issue, but he's only going to be able to do so much in Washington to solve this issue, as with our senators and the congressional delegation. And, the way I look at this, like, we are in a climate emergency, we're in a housing crisis, and the MBTA has done absolutely nothing to alleviate our concerns. Like, I understand the fiscal concerns, obviously there's a lot of problems that the MBTA has dealt with long before this, and I don't blame the MBTA inherently for all the problems. But the way the MBTA is going at this, we're only going to exacerbate our climate crisis. Our housing crisis is going to be exacerbated because there are going to be people who would not want to rent apartments where they can't bring their cars or have to live in areas that aren't served by, reliable public transit. And, and I have a very bad feeling here, like, in a decade or two, we're going to be talking about MBTA service cuts, but it's not about cuts because, the MBTA doesn't have the money and all that too, but it's because, parts of greater Boston area are going to be underwater, and, you can't really serve like areas that are underwater. I mean, maybe the ferry, but I don't think that's very practical. And I just look at this and I'm just like, what is this? Like, is this really the best the MBTA can do? Like, doing all these cuts? Like, I understand, like, if the MBTA needs legislative help to solve this, and I'm not saying like that's an issue, like, I'm very proud that, Mike Connolly, Tommy Vitolo, and everyone else here understands that, the MBTA's problems are going to need a lot of more help than just, give them, basically like, just to let the MBTA solve these problems on their own. But I just look at this and, I don't really want to leave Newton, but like, the more these cuts happen, like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, the 500 commuter bus route got eliminated, like, I don't know how long ago, but, now with the Riverside development, like, I don't know if that's going to come back now because of these cuts. And, if we get rid of the 505, that's probably going to be lost and gone forever, as I think it was Weezer said or something like that. And it's just, I really, really wish the MBTA would be more forthcoming about what they need. And I think it's very clear that the formula to have the MBTA funded by sales taxes is not working. Like, I think it's very clear, like, if I were a legislature, and I'm sorry if I'm like ranting at this point, if I were a legislature, I just put this back in the general budget, because clearly the last 20 years has shown that the MBTA is forced to basically take out loans to fund itself. There's really no way for the MBTA to, like, keep running without making cuts. And, the vision of the MBTA, it's all about products, and it's nothing about, building those community relationships. And, this doesn't give anyone any hope. And I really am frustrated. I have friends who are going to be screwed by, losing the 505 route. And, I don't know, like, what's going to happen if the 553 and 554 reduce service, but like it's a shame. It's a real shame. And I think, I think I've spoken quite a bit, so I'll give back the floor now, but thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, I'm going to ask Meg Ward. I'm going to unmute you. should be unmuted. Ms. Ward? I'm going to mute you back, and then I'm going to move on to the next on the list.
Hello? Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
Nope, all good.
Okay. I live on the north side of Newton along the Mass Pike, and the area between Newtonville and West Newton. And I have been in this area, and I've been commuting into Boston for over 25 years. So I feel I can speak with great experience and authority on the subject matter of both, in both on the commuter rail and as well as the buses. And 25 years, I think that's even longer than probably some people who've served management in the MBTA. Put aside the pandemic for a second, I just want to speak to our area in terms of service and what's happened over the last 20 some odd years. We have seen over gradually, year to year, chipping away in our services. And it began and it's funny because we're in a weird situation where the commuter rail will make cuts to our area, and they'll say, well, you know, you have the bus to rely on. You can use the bus as well. And then the bus will make cuts to our area saying that, oh, you have the commuter rail. So we're stuck in this weird geographic location where both entities are cutting services saying that, oh, you got the other one to use. And this chipping away of service started in the 90s when the expansion of the commuter rail happened. They were expanding to Worcester, and then they were also offering express lines. So that meant they were bypassing the local stops in Newton. So, you know, we saw a diminished service there, and then we had interruption of a service because they were allowing the express trains to go through. So that was happening in the 90s. And then in the most recent years, and we continued to see a diminution in service in our commuter rail stops. And then on top of that, with the bus service, the 553, 554, in the last few years, they've cut services. We don't even have a 553, 554 service over the weekend. Now, bear in mind, we're a couple miles up the road from the 504, which runs to Newton Corner. So we've had diminished services. We don't even, you know, it's funny. I don't even think people realize this. As our mayor spoke earlier, Ruth Ann Fuller, she indicated there was a lot of development planning, a lot of development happening in this very area, the stretch between Newtonville and West Newton. And, you can't even take a bus into the city, direct into the city from our area on a Saturday. Forget Sundays, the buses don't even run on Sundays. You have to take a commuter rail. And say so you have to go to Newton Corner to get a bus into the city on a Saturday. Now say you wanted to do a dinner and a movie. Guess what the last bus return bus home to Newton Corner, which is a mile or two down the road from where you live. So you have to drive your car to catch the bus at 504, by the way. So the last bus from the city home on a Saturday night is like, I don't know, 7:20, something like that last time I checked. So throw out dinner and a movie. You have no bus service home. My point is that our area has been suffering from diminished services over the last, 10 to 20 years. Now, with regard to this presentation tonight, I would like to make 3 comments. The first is, and other people have said this, you're proposing these service cuts to be effective July 2021. That is when hopefully things are going to be resuming back to normal. Again, I live on the bus routes. I see these buses go by, 553, 554, they're empty. Why are you not drastically cutting service now so we can save money? It seems that you're not responding to the drastic reduction in ridership, as appropriately as you should be. So my second point to this presentation is that you're presenting data that's overall. I mean, this meeting right now is supposed to be presented to the region of Brookline, Cambridge, Newton, Somerville, and Watertown. And the numbers that you are presenting don't speak to our audience. You are presenting overall T data on ridership, high ridership, low ridership. Bus 111, I don't know what the hell that is. Bus 111, where does that serve? That means nothing to me. So you're not even speaking you're not even presenting this information. Really, it's a business. You should be presenting this business information to your customers, which is supposedly Brookline, Cambridge, Newton, Somerville, Watertown. So I'm looking at this presentation and I know it can't translate to where I live. I don't understand it. Lastly, the proposal to shorten the routes 553, 554 would be catastrophic. And that being, I mean, unless you're planning to increase your amount of buses for 504s, the people who get on 553, 554, and there's a lot of people in West Newton, all the way down in Newtonville. And all of those people, if you're saying you shorten the route to Newton Corner, that means they all have to get off the bus. And this is not just 553, 554, I believe it's 556 and 558, you said. All of these people have to get off the bus at Newton Corner and catch the 504. Are you going to increase the number of buses? Are you going to increase the frequency and capacity of the 504 buses to accommodate the backlog of passengers that are going to be sitting at Newton Corner trying to get downtown? So that would be absolutely catastrophic if you did that, if you shorten the bus routes, because it will cause the backlog at Newton Corner. And again, I'm saying this after 25 some odd years of commuting into this city. So I guess that's it. I thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I am going to unmute Jess Sheehan. You've just been asked to unmute. Just a reminder to folks, to the extent possible, we'd like to get to everyone tonight to keep your remarks brief. Thank you. Ms. Sheehan, the floor is yours.
Hi, thanks. I will try to keep this quick. My name is Jessica Sheehan. I'm in my mid-30s and I've never owned a car, relying on walking and the MBTA for nearly all my transportation needs throughout my entire life. So I understand that transit is essential. And I do appreciate the thoughtfulness that has gone into harm reduction here. As others have pointed out, these are terrible choices to make. I'm just dismayed that the MBTA is making any cuts at all, because cutting transit service is inherently inequitable, as it comes disproportionately at the expense of the working class, people of color, undocumented people, disabled people, and young people. For all the thought that's gone into distributing these cuts equitably among transit riders, there's no equity whatsoever between transit riders and motorists, as the difference between fare hikes and gas tax increases makes clear. I'm enraged that our legislature can't manage to pass the bill to fund the T. And I don't understand how our state will be able to meet our emissions goals for 2050 when we had chronic underinvestment in essential infrastructure like this, even pre-pandemic. Finally, as a Cambridge resident, I would like to ask you to please take the Cambridge City Council's offer of revenue assistance for local routes seriously. If the state is unwilling to fund the T at the levels demanded by our state's equity and climate goals, as it very much appears to be, please work with municipalities and allow them to protect their own workers and residents. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, I am going to unmute Tyreek Lucas. Should be unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I got it. Hi, my name is Tariq Lucas. I just want to thank everyone who has spoken out against these drastic cuts in service. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I live a few blocks off of Washington Street in Newton. The proposed plan calls for the elimination and/or the reduction of bus service on or near Washington Street in Newton. This will be a disaster for our community, and I can't even fathom that you will consider cutting MBTA service in Newton. Newton businesses need public transit in order to stay viable. If you were to make these cuts in services, the businesses will suffer. And as a result, these businesses will shut down and will not return. If the T were to eliminate the number 52 bus route as proposed, that will leave Newton with only one bus that travels north to south. The number 52 serves the villages of Newton Corner, Newton Center, and Oak Hill. They need bus service to get into downtown Boston. On top of that, the T is an essential part of Newton's climate action plan. Climate change is real, it's happening, and it's now. Public transportation is essential to lowering our carbon footprint. I ask that you please do not make any cuts in service to Newton and in the region. Thank you for holding this public hearing.
Thank you very much, Tariq. Next, I am going to unmute Mr. Evan Foss. I am unmuting you now. You should be good to go.
I think you chose the wrong person to unmute.
Oh, I apologize. Hold on one second.
I've been unmuted, but I don't think I was asked to be next.
Oh, I apologize about that. I am going to mute you, and Mr. Foss, you should be unmuted.
Okay, can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I had to log in and out a whole bunch of times at the beginning of the meeting to get a stable connection. So that's probably my fault. COVID is a short-term problem, as we're sort of learning now. You know, eventually we're going to crack this nut and things are going to go back to normal. A lot of people are working very hard right now to make that happen. The people who you are going to be inconveniencing or you're going to really be messing up with by doing this, mainly the folks who are keeping us all, you know, fed during the pandemic. There are a number of things in here that strike me as being rather interesting. AFC 2.0, the rapidly budget consuming, at this point, billion-dollar fare payment system, which for some reason still includes paying the $160 million to maintain the existing system. That's still not on the chopping block. And I don't understand why collecting people's fares is more important than operating the system that you're charging for. I also want to point out that, you know, you voted earlier this year, and I was there, I tried to fight it, to buy bi-level coaches for the commuter rail, more of them. At the same time, well, actually not the same time, the next week you voted to electrify the commuter rail, which is not compatible with the bi-level coaches. The plan everyone was pushing, the plan that made the most sense, the plan that made the most economic sense, not just for the state and for the ridership, but for you, the operator, was to go with EMUs. So why are you still buying the bi-level coaches? Why can't the bi-level coaches, instead of being postponed as you're currently planning, simply just get canceled? If Newton really wants its commuter rail stations, you know, I live in the wedge in between the Green Line and the commuter rail. And I used to use the commuter rail, and I now mostly use the Green Line, even though it's the more crowded of the two. I wouldn't mind seeing the Type 10 car for the Green Line extension project postponed. I still feel, as I have since inception, that there are design problems in there. If Newton wants the commuter rail station, you know, our representatives showed up and commented that they wanted the fancier commuter rail station, as Newton is one to want fancy things. You know, Newton should offer up some amount of money here for this. I'm not living in the fancier end of Newton, but this is not a town that's short of money. If we're allowing the school teachers to leave the windows open so that we're literally using the schools to contribute to global warming, and I'm not trying to hurt the achievement gap, and I respect that the teachers want to be in a COVID-safe environment, but that's a luxury that the majority of the state's public school system could never afford or consider, and there has to be a better way to solve that problem. And the fact that that's the thing that we're doing just goes to say how wasteful we can be. If Cambridge is offering up money, Newton should too. And I get that my taxes will probably go up because of that, but yeah. T ridership is inverse to the health of the economy. The funding model as it exists now, as it's existed since 2001, that's based on sales tax revenue, does not account for the fact that we are likely to still be in a recession when this thing ends. So having reduced service right now and going forward is a bad idea. I don't, for one, believe that you're actually going to bring the service back at the end. Not that I doubt the integrity of the board or the integrity of the general manager. I just don't believe it because of the history of the T, and the fact is that you folks are impermanent. I mean, we've been through 5 general managers in 5 years. That was one of the things that was highlighted in the safety report as a problem. No offense to Steve, but he's in a revolving door job. People are going to be ticked off about this, and they're likely to come back and demand the replacement of either individuals on the board or, you know, the general manager's office, and we'll have more churn, and who knows if this ever comes back. The A-line was never officially ended in its service until the 1990s, even though it hadn't operated for like 20 years by that point. The elevated line to, I was about to call it by its old name, to Nubian Square, that was allowed to rot while it was operating, specifically, I've always believed, so that it could be torn down. And in the end, it was and relocated because it actually was cheaper to relocate than it was to maintain. It had gotten that bad. MassDOT consumed the MBTA back during the Duval-Patrick years. We're seeing a decreased usage of the road system. Why is it that with roads getting used less and therefore less road maintenance needed, we're not seeing some money being redirected from the roadways into the T? You know, in 2001, not only did we change to this stupid funding model, the T got a whole bunch of debt transferred over to it from the Big Dig. Now, you've managed, I believe, looking at the figures, to pay back the principal, but you're still paying off debt service, which tells me that, unless I'm mistaken, you're still working on the interest. I think that somebody needs to apply some pressure on the state to pay that back. It was never fair to do that in the first place. And, you know, in terms of all the projects the state's put forward money for, the Green Line transformation, Green Line expansion, commuter rail electrification, as far as I'm concerned, if you look at the value of all those projects, those are just the inflation compensated cost of the Big Dig debt transfer in the first place. You had trouble finding bus drivers before the pandemic. If you start laying off people now or furloughing people, there's a high likelihood you're not going to be able to hire them back when the pandemic ends. Those folks are trained people. You spent a lot of money and a lot of time to train them. Operating some of these things is not a trivial matter. When they leave for other transit agencies, maybe up in Canada where they're valued more, you're not going to just be able to get them back, even though you're going to have a surge in ridership. And then you've got people like me who are now being faced with the question of, do I buy a car or not? I haven't owned one for 10 years. I don't want to start now. But after I buy one, why would I want to be paying for a monthly T-Pass? That just seems crazy. It's really hard for you. You were complaining pre-pandemic about the difficulty of pulling people out of their cars because, you know, it's 2 recurring expenses, auto insurance and, you know, whatever else, versus the T-Pass and parking. You've got to work on that. You know, it's very frustrating to me that things like the projects that were proposed and were a part of the Big Dig's environmental offsets, the blue to red line extension, the north-south rail link, there's always time and there's always money to study them, and you can never study or consider them too much. But now that you want to roll back service, you can do that somehow magically with a couple meetings and come up with a whole plan in about a month. And that seems completely preposterous to me. The asymmetry in there really speaks, I feel, a lot to motivation on the part of the institution. And I'm not trying to single out, you know, the people who planned this. I'm just saying that the way it was structured, it feels a bit ridiculous to me. Now, to the folks who are talking about equity, the good news is that eventually we'll have a very equitable system, because once global warming hits, between the ferry that you probably won't bring back, and the other services, you know, that are be underwater, you won't be operating a system at all. So, I mean, it'll be that. Anyway, thanks for your time. I'm not as frustrated with the board and with Laurel and folks as it might sound. I'm more frustrated with the people who voted down Connolly's amendments, but, you know, thanks.
Thank you. I am going to be taking one more comment here on the queue that I am seeing, and Mr. Andrew Timon, I'm going to ask to unmute you. You should be good to go.
Hi. Could I propose that if anyone else wants to speak, that we could extend the meeting for an extra 15 minutes. But beyond that, I'll speak to my comments quickly. I think a lot of points that have been raised are important. I think it's important to note that that transit agencies across the country and across the world are facing cuts at this time. Agencies across the US are going to be facing cuts, and states are also facing near 400 billion in deficits at this time, and cuts in education and healthcare are coming. Schools are already considering cutting arts classes and you know, increased class sizes. But I think it's also important that, you know, this was not just because of the pandemic. This has been the case since after the 2008 recession, when public funds were used to bail out the banks and Wall Street, and to pay for those bailouts, cuts were made to classes, schools. I think it's you know, also important that in this pandemic, the same type of bailout was used. It was not used to stop the pandemic, to invest in protective care for workers, for testing, for contact tracing. It was used, again, to keep the stock market up, to bail out the banks and the large corporations. And this is the money that is being paid for the out of the federal budget, which is, you know, issued through bonds on the public's back, to keep these banks afloat and these corporations afloat, who will then are now going to cut jobs, to lay off workers. And these were passed by unanimously by both parties. So I think that that's important to realize. And to speak on Evan's point, you know, the MBTA, not only from the debt from the Big Dig, but they procure funding from issuing their own bonds. They are in over $5 billion in debt from bonds that they issue every year for their capital investment programs. And to speak to Varun's point on, you know, that it seems like it's being run as a business, it's because they're paying over $200 million a year in interest payments alone. That's on top of the, you know, just the paying back the principal to, you know, JP Morgan, Citibank, Wells Fargo. And they are working, they're not making cuts to those, you know, wealthy bondholders and their interest payments. They're making cuts to the services that workers are, you know, requiring for their livelihood. So there's a clear class basis behind these decisions that the MBTA is making. And, you know, and I think it's important to realize that, you know, that this is a much larger problem than just the MTA and Boston or the state. This is well, not only a countrywide, but a global problem. And, you know, the country is going to be in 100% of its GDP, and that will increase from these bailouts. And there will be massive cuts on the horizon to schools and to transit and to healthcare. And, you know, both parties, the Republican and the Democrat, support these and are working in the interest of the banks and Wall Street to pass these. So, you know, I don't think we should be pressuring officials who support the Democratic Party, who help, you know, support the stock market and Wall Street and the banks. But I think a fundamental class line has to be drawn, and workers who are facing these cuts around the country should organize in their own, and because there is no pressuring these politicians and the Financial Control Board, who are really just working in their interest. So I think that is what I want to say.
Thank you for your comments. Again, I'd like to remind folks to keep the comments brief. We will be taking a few more of those individuals that had raised their hand prior to 8 o'clock. Next, I am going to unmute Mr. James Wilberforce. I'm asking you to unmute now.
Thank you. For the record, my name is actually James Williamson. I sometimes use a pseudonym for purposes of hiding from Zoom. So there have been some really great comments. It's been very interesting to hear a lot of the comments tonight, especially like the comments about not fighting over the crumbs and the comments about where to, addressing the bigger question of reductions around the funding, the funding issues. Somebody asked Willie Sutton why he robbed banks, and he said, because that's where the money is. If we think about where is the money in our federal system, we've got a $730 or $750 billion military budget, which nobody ever seems to want to talk about except groups that get organized like Mass Peace Action. I'm not a member, but they've done work for many years now trying to get people to address and focus on this issue of shifting money from the military budget to things like public transportation. So I'd really like to have people who are involved in leadership positions at the T begin to think about putting that forward, as well as going to the legislature. Rather than asking communities to kick in more money, we should be taking it from the military budget and from big corporations and wealthy individuals, in my opinion. A previous Secretary of Transportation said recently about the T that it's a sick organization. I don't think it's possible to talk about all of these issues without getting down into an essential element of what has been a continuing problem with the MBTA. If indeed it is a sick organization, we have to keep coming back to that among these other topics and look at what needs to be done to turn the MBTA into a healthy, positive organization that isn't a sick organization. What can be done to do that? I'm not going to get into that now, but I encourage those members of the Fiscal Control Board who are already thinking about things like that to continue and to develop a public constituency for changes that are needed. We need to get organized better as a large metropolitan Boston community to start demanding the kinds of changes that we begin to understand are needed. Now, I have just a couple specific suggestions. Apart from not cutting service after midnight, I've been taking buses and the Red Line right through this entire pandemic. And I'm not eager to see service cut after midnight, especially people have mentioned people who rely on it to get home. They take the train from Chelsea, they go to work in a restaurant somewhere like Cambridge, and then they are struggling to get home by the T and by a bus. And that service is going to be cut, but all the more prosperous people that order out for food are going to continue to do that. 3 suggestions. Right now, the MBTA is the shelter of first resort for all of the homeless people in the Boston area. If you want people to ride the T, if you want people to feel safe riding the T, it's not just about the pandemic. It's about the experience of going into a T station, and it is full of people who are homeless, unsheltered homeless, sheltering in the T, sleeping on the benches, sleeping on all of the cars, riding the buses. This problem is not the problem of the T, but it is a problem that the T ends up, people who ride the T end up not wanting to ride the T. So to work with the various entities that could begin to address homelessness in a more effective way, so that people want to feel good about and feel safe going into T stations. One specific idea, instead of fighting it all the time, take the lower platform, of the station in Harvard Station after the last train inbound at 12:30, whenever it is, take that whole lower platform and make that an emergency shelter with extra service support overnight, so that you don't have people hiding everywhere on the T, but you give them a place, a safe place that isn't used by T riders, and you make sure that people go there rather than spreading out across the T. Who's going to want to ride the T, and revenue is going to be affected by this? Secondly, there are announcements that are necessary announcements, but they are excruciatingly painfully loud. It's crazy. I do not understand why nobody monitors the volume of the new announcements that have been introduced that say, bark painfully into your ears. Face coverings are required on all MBTA vehicles and in stations. It's 5 times or 10 times louder than the normal announcements, which are sometimes already too loud. And you get them twice at every stop if they're working the way they're intended to work. So why would anybody want to ride the T if you're subjected to painfully loud announcements? Not that they shouldn't be there. Does anybody monitor the volumes on the T? If people went out and paid attention to what it's like to actually ride the T and make adjustments in things like the volumes of these announcements, maybe more people would be willing to ride the T and interested in riding the T rather than trying to avoid it. And then if you go into a T station as a paying member of the paying public, a T rider, a T advocate, and if it's late at night, T inspectors yell at you, where are you going? Because they're so freaked out about having to deal with the people who are homeless, they're verbally assaulting regular customers for fear that you might be one of these late night people trying to shelter in the T. And there's no policing of the behavior of some of the inspectors. So those are some ideas that could be done without, it wouldn't cost the T a penny. People would feel a lot better about the T, and there would be opportunities to build on a better culture to move forward to address the bigger issues that so many people have spoken about so eloquently. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to again reiterate to folks to just keep their remarks brief so that others have an opportunity to speak as well. I'm going to unmute Mr. John Pelletier.
Got it. Thank you. I will try to be quick. My name is John Pelletier. I'm an appointed member of the Newton Council on Aging and head our transportation subgroup. While these cuts will affect my wife and I personally, as we don't own a car and use transit to get around, I'll be speaking to the cuts and their impact on our seniors. Taking the regional point that was made earlier, while I'm very concerned about the actual bus and rail service reduction and cuts for Newton and the impact they'll have on our seniors here in Newton, may be happening just as it may be safer for them to be out in public more. This impact will be just as great for every senior within the service boundary. These cuts are not at all fair to our older community members across the state. Social inclusion and transportation access, as well as housing affordability, are the key issues for seniors. While most communities have some type of shuttle service for seniors for shopping or medical appointments, it's frankly never enough, and they often don't go into the afternoons. Our older community members rely on the full breadth of the MBTA service to literally live their lives. I understand this is designed to fit a budget gap. I get it. I also understand the need for the current reduced service levels due to the COVID pandemic. Obviously, we have far less riders out there that need to go places, but we cannot afford to make them permanent. We already have a housing crisis for our seniors in this state. We already have a social inclusion crisis for our seniors. And frankly, we don't need to add on additional transit crisis to the mix. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And then I'm going to lastly unmute Mr. William McAviney. I believe I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, you did. Bill McAviney, Cambridge Transit Advisory Committee. With respect to building back service, I'm concerned you're only adding back service when ridership increases, and I fear that will lead to a downward spiral. I hope you will instead keep in mind timing of wide vaccine distribution and get in front of that. Once that happens, our choice is to provide transit services to restart both our ridership and our economy, or to be playing catch up. When something people need isn't there, they make other plans, especially when you can only make changes 2 or 4 times a year. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes the comments for today. Now I am going, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And I would like to welcome Vice Chair Monica Tibbetts-Nutt to make some closing remarks on behalf of the MBTA. Thank you everyone for joining today.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for all of your time. I know it is a late hour and we really do appreciate being able to hear your feedback on a lot of these proposals. As I said before, this isn't a situation of the agency versus the communities. We are facing a heartbreaking challenge alongside our communities. Service cuts are always an absolute last resort, one reserved for when the agency has no other choice because of funding challenges that it does not control. We as the communities of the Commonwealth are in this together. These changes are not about one mode or one route. It's about understanding what is needed now, what will be needed as we continue through this crisis, and what the needs of the next several years will be. Once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. I know it is not easy to attend these meetings, especially at night. So please, thank you, and take care.
Thank you everyone for joining us today, and we very much appreciate your feedback and comments. Again, we ask that you please visit our website, mbta.com/forgingahead, for your opportunity to be able to provide more comments and feedback. Thank you.